Support for Wrong About Everything comes from Minnesota's credit unions. Credit unions are locally based, member-owned financial cooperatives that return earnings to members through higher savings rates, lower loan rates, and reduced fees. Visit mncun.org for more information.
Brian has served as the Director of Governmental Relations for the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, Legislative Director to the Speaker of the Minnesota House, Director of Fiscal Policy for the Minnesota Business Partnership, and Committee Administrator for the Minnesota House Committee on Commerce, Jobs, and Economic Development. Additionally, McDaniel spent 5 years as an appointed member of the Metropolitan Council, was elected by his peers to serve on the board of the Minnesota Government Relations Council, teaches American government at Concordia University, St. Paul, and makes frequent television and radio appearances as a political analyst. Brian holds a JD from William Mitchell College of Law, as well as a BA in political science from Minnesota State University. So welcome, Brian. Amy Koch. Amy is a political strategist at Momentum Advocacy and a regular commentator on Minnesota local media. She is frequently quoted on WCCO, NPR, the Star Tribune, and TPT's Almanac, nationally on the Washington Post and New York Times, and internationally appears on Global TV, BBC, and TRT World News. She's an adjunct faculty at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Political Science, teaching a course in crisis communications. She's a former Russian linguist for the United States Air Force and the National Security Agency, where she was awarded the Joint Service Commendation Medal for her contributions to the intelligence community. Amy was elected to the Minnesota State Senate in 2005 and served until 2013. She became the first woman ever elected in Minnesota as Senate Majority Leader in 2011. Amy, thank you. Javier Murillo Alicia is the president of Service Employee International's Union Local 26, which unites close to 6,000 property service workers in the Twin Cities metro area. He is also recognized in Minnesota as a political strategist and appears regularly on local political talk shows as a progressive commentator. Murillo is also active in electoral politics. A progressive opinion leader in Minnesota, he is a regular political commentator on TPT's Almanac, as well as KSTP's At Issue. Murillo was previously a historian and an anthropologist, teaching courses in Latin American history, comparative colonial cultures, and globalization at Carleton and Macalester colleges. He is a Fulbright scholar and has a bachelor's degree in history from Yale University. Welcome, and thank you for being with us today. And I will turn this over to our panel, so welcome.
And the award for the most outdated bio goes to
this one,
Javier. that is our fault, not your fault. Thank you so much for having us here. This will be a podcast that we do put out on the airwaves. Is that how you say it? So we very much appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. And so we will start off the podcast as we normally would and speak to our podcast listeners as well as to you. So we apologize if the beginning here is a little clunky, but we're gonna get through it.
And you can find this on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you get your podcasts. And you're also will be posted up on YouTube, Gabe, and our YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm. So, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Wrong About Everything podcast. I am Republican strategist and Twin City Sugar, Brian McDaniel.
And I am former Republican Senate Majority Leader Amy Cope.
I am Democratic strategist and the Puerto Rican heat, Javier Murillo.
And we are
Wrong
about everything. And today we're wrong about aging.
We are wrong about growing old. We are, yes. So we normally are at the Minnesota Credit Union Network studios, deep within the recesses of MBC Studios in Northeast Minneapolis, but that's not where we are today.
No, where are we, Brian?
We are in the beautiful St. Paul Hotel.
This is lovely.
Yes. And
not saying nothing, Gabe, but this is some nice digs.
Yeah.
We could get used to this.
Yeah.
So before we launch into the program, we want to point out and thank Gabe Noah, our fantastic producer who worked with LeadingAge staff and the venue to make sure that all of this worked out. And so far, so good. Far, so good. So for our regular podcast listeners, as we said, we are doing a special podcast on Wrong About Aging, and we are here with our friends at LeadingAge Minnesota and the LeadingAge Institute. LeadingAge Minnesota is a statewide association for providers of senior care, which includes nursing homes, assisted living, adult day, and other home and community-based services. They have about 1,600 members and serve over 60,000 seniors across the state of Minnesota. The Institute is their annual conference, which happened this week and is wrapping up today. And we are very happy to be included as part of your Opinion Leaders series. And Javier walked in and said, "Are we opinion leaders?" And I said, "No, I think that's all of you."
Not these two.
Definitely not. But I have worked with Carrie and with Aaron for a number of years in many different capacities, and I was very happy to be included in this. And with all of the turnover and turmoil that are going on, both at the state and federal level, these topics are extremely important, extremely timely. And as we try to get through the 2-year biennial budget in Minnesota, the issues affecting your businesses and the people that you serve, if they are not front and center, certainly need to be. So I don't know if anybody wants to.
Well, should we give a little background on the podcast first?
Yeah, absolutely.
So just so y'all know.
How we ended up here.
Yeah, how we ended up here. So Wrong About Everything started over 10 years ago. I had this idea that, so I met Brian doing political talk show stuff. And then we became friends through Words with Friends when that was all the rage. And we played a lot, but mostly used the chat function, and we'd crack each other up. And I learned a few things about. He was my first Republican friend, and I learned that Republicans.
Now we're Republican. Now I'm just a Republican acquaintance.
Yes, correct. And I learned that Republicans can be super funny, but have terrible vocabulary. And found that we were kind of funniest with each other when making fun of our own parties. I was sort of an early adopter of podcasts, and sort of talked to Brian at one point and be like, "Hey, I have this idea of like people who disagree, like just meeting and talking and in a relaxed way, and it was important that it be relaxed and fun and funny if possible, because." At the time, I thought we were dangerously close to being a society so siloed that the civil fabric was going to break apart. Over 10, over about 11 years ago. A lot's happened since then. But the thing about silos and the thing about humor, right, is humor is about breaking boundaries, right? What things that are funny, like fart jokes or whatever, it's like inappropriate, right? You break a boundary, but what your boundaries are depend on who you're with. And you all probably have the experience of like you probably joke with your girlfriends or guy friends, and in ways that you would not with other people, because it'd be and so it was sort of an experiment. And what do we do? How do we have these conversations and be able to break those boundaries and risk risk offense, but to be able to sort of build a sense like that this kind of dialogue is possible. So we started this way before the Trump years, and I always say that the Trump years made it harder to do, but also it felt more urgent and more important that we do it. And so yeah, we've been doing it for a very long time, and we actually are friends. Like we actually would bring soup to each other if we're sick. Although I was sick this week and no one brought me soup. Actually, you did not bring me soup. Actually,
I was so busy at the Capitol.
Yeah, we always use that metaphor, and here I was sick at home. And yeah, you have brought soup, just not this week.
Sometimes we are on Almanac, and then we go to the hot tub at Javier's house. Not Brian.
That is a. They have expanded the term "we." That is not
the pretty ones on the podcast.
Yes. Amy.
Oh, and then I joined in the podcast a few years later. I was in the middle of an emotional and political drama shootout in my life. You can Google it if you have any interest. And so,
if you have time,
it's a lot. But had been kind of subbing occasionally on the podcast. The original Republican woman was a man because, Republican war on women. And
we needed a funny Republican woman.
Right.
And we couldn't find one.
Except this girl. So I think it was 2015, maybe 2015, when I was sort of invited on as a permanent member. And to say, for people to understand, Javier, Brian and I were friends. Javier and I were not friends. We're not frenemies.
I took pot shots at her on Twitter. Constant pot shots. I was actually a little bit afraid of him. And so to have for people that say, "Oh, I just don't know how you can do this, how you can be friends." I can't even stand to be around my uncle Marv anymore. To understand that where we started from was not even not acquainted or mildly acquainted. We actually started from a deficit in this, and have worked our way through trust and conversation and doing exactly like this in front every day or every week in front of an audience. We have honed our skills to be to get where we are. So. Yeah.
Well, let's start talking about the topic at hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
About
Some of us are aging more rapidly than others, but
Yeah.
Wow.
I wasn't looking at you. I was trying to.
As the youngest member of the podcast. Minnesota now has more people turning 65 than going into kindergarten. A 2023 public opinion poll by the Long-Term Care Imperative suggested that nearly half of Minnesotans would reduce hours or leave their job rather than place their aging parent more than an hour away if nothing closer was available. We're all people of a certain age who have parents in varying geographic locations and states of health. Javier, your parents are aging. They have some health concerns, but they're in Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. Amy, your mother has passed and your dad has memory care issues. My parents are emotionally distant, but
far too close.
So as your
geographically,
as your families are trying to figure out what to do, how true does that statement ring to the two of you? As far as people will, the lengths that people need to go to make sure that their parents are being taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this a lot because, as Brian said, my parents are elderly. My father is a Vietnam vet and has Agent Orange related Parkinson's disease. So I try to make it home as much more often than I used to. But I think a lot of these issues, I think as I have gotten older, I feel like there are I feel often very trite and boring because I come to realizations that I've heard people say before, but that you don't truly know until you get to a certain age. There are certain truths about life that you just don't fully understand, including things like you don't know where the time went, and all of a sudden you're in your 50s, and you're like, oh, how did that happen? And all of a sudden you have to plan for things, and all of a sudden, like, oh my God, like we're a sandwich generation. I'm only half a sandwich because I don't have kids, but
You're open-faced sandwich.
I'm an open-faced sandwich.
You're an open-faced sandwich.
It's hard enough. But I think that collectively as a society, we do that as well. Like we do that like not learning until we get there, it feels like. And with a lot of these issues, it's like that they're, younger people don't see the urgency of it. It's like until we all individually experience this, and it's a terrible way of dealing with our aging population. I'm struck by that survey answer because there used to be a time when that's how we would just take care of our elders, right? You just take care of them in community with family. And as our society has become more siloed in a million different ways, that's one of the things that we've done is push elder care outside of the home. And it's necessary, right? Because everyone needs to work, and everyone, so it's an incredibly frustrating situation, I think, to be sort of thrust into, and so that's just like kind of my personal observations about where things are before we move into policy stuff.
Yeah, I think as a society in general, we become so reliant on folks that are in this room to sort of take the reins on, caring for our loved ones. So my father, Xavier said, my mother passed, or as Brian said, my mother passed away very young, 64, in 2012 for breast cancer. And almost immediately we started noticing with my father, he was 68, so fairly young, but we started to notice like a few oddities, and we chalked it up to his hearing at first. And then we chalked it up to, and depression. We said, well, he's lost mom. They've been married 44 years. He's sad. He did remarry after about 18 months, which old dudes do. They just like to be married, I guess. And we like her very much. And actually, thank goodness for Diane, because she has become a part of the care program. So about 4 or 5 years in, we realized, there is really something going on. We took the time to convince him to go in, started medication. The doctor said, look, your dad's a super ager. The man broke his neck 5 years ago when he flipped his four-wheeler, and it didn't really slow him down. So physically, unfortunately, in ways, my father is incredibly healthy and strong. And yet with the Alzheimer's now, he rarely knows who I am. He can't really put a sentence together anymore. He still speaks, but it's very fragmented and not, he clearly doesn't know kind of what he's saying. He does recognize us from time to time. So he is still at home. And I'm grateful for that. And in part, it is because he ran a successful business, and he had money set aside for his care, and also he remarried. And Diane has been helping in the home. We have got her 5 day a week in-home care, which is incredibly expensive. We pay out of pocket, but it is getting to the point where he no longer has his keys. It was a huge fight to get his truck from him. And it is becoming apparent Diane, who is turning 80 this year, is no longer up to the task of caring for him. And so we have been looking at all our options, and it is difficult to find available care. They live out in Wright County. And so I want to give a shout out to Greater Minnesota providers, because I feel like the Metro has almost an embarrassment of riches. And I know it doesn't feel like that for everybody, but compared to Greater Minnesota, it's a whole next level of trying to find appropriate care, and never mind being able to afford it, because that's just, and so grateful for what you do. I just feel like I'm just right in the middle of this discussion. And the thing is, everyone eventually will be, right? We're not anything special in my family. We knew it was coming. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. Both my grandmas had Alzheimer's. We were certain that it was going to be happening to us at some point. And here it is. And you know, his care and going into memory care is going to be incredibly difficult. He's going to be grumpy as hell because that is just how he is. He still looks at the old dude sitting at the coffee shop and like says, like, look at those old dudes just sitting around. And I was like, Dad, they're literally 5 to 10 years younger than you. So he's going to be a real bear to try to get into memory care. But it is an issue that all of us will face, that society is facing in general. And of course, the silver tsunami is just tsunami. With my dad, he's a leading boomer, right? He's the young, kind of the oldest boomer that you can be with, still be a boomer. And with those boomers coming on, we're just really seeing, cracking the tip of the iceberg on senior care.
Well, my parents are both still alive and they're still in their home. My dad just turned 81 and he's starting to have some mobility issues and starting to, have some noticing that he's slipping in a certain aspect. We are more dealing with it with actually my grandmother who turned 100 this summer. And so she is in a facility, but she's in a facility in Illinois. So my mother, who late 70s, essentially doesn't live here anymore. She essentially has relocated most of her time down in Illinois to help my aunts and uncles take care of my grandmother, make sure that that everything is being taken care of there. So I am kind of being able to see, not with my parents, but with my grandmother, how hard it is to find a facility, and when you find one with good people, and how important it is to make sure that those people stay employed, and that they have an incentive to stay, so you don't have the constant staff turnover. So I'm experiencing that. And another thing that I've noticed is, before I got into politics, I was an attorney in private practice, and one of the populations I served were vulnerable adults who were in abusive situations. And one thing that I have noticed, and that was about 25 years ago, is how different attitudes are now towards the aging population. And of course, obviously, it's because more people now see themselves in that population, and it's sad that we had to, that is what had to kind of like flip the switch with people. But I am seeing it. So once upon a time, somebody who passed away or something like that, it was well, they had cancer. They were going to pass away in 6 months anyway, and it shifted to, well, how much would you pay for the last 6 months of your life? So people really did start seeing a shift, and you're seeing that at the Capitol as well, where there is a focus with, it seems like we never get both parties focused on the same thing at the same time, but you are seeing a lot more of a focus with members of the legislature on aging issues, and it becomes political like everything else, which is unfortunate. But it's the importance of the advocacy that all of you do and your organizations, because there are, just think, how many issues could they be discussing? There's opioids and everything else that homelessness, everything else that desperately needs attention. Once your organizations and your industry stops advocating for itself is the day that they stop paying attention to you at all. So what you do and what they do for you is extremely, extremely important. Another kind of harbinger that society is shifting its focus is Hollywood. You're seeing shows like The Golden Bachelor, Golden Bachelorette, Man on the Inside. It says here that there's a Golden Girls reboot. There is.
Harrison Ford is amazing. He's on everything. And I think he's hotter than ever. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think someone's forgetting that Han Solo is the coolest character that ever existed on the face of the planet.
But that's fair.
I was struck in the framing that we got from your conference organizers that about that when we talk about Minnesota being the best place to raise a family, and we were asked upon, like, looking forward, where do seniors fit into that framework? And this siloing of society that has happened. So my experience of it was, and harkening back to things you only learn when you get to a certain age. Some years ago, my husband and I were talking, and I was like, there are no young people who feel any obligation to take care of us when we're young, when we're old. Like, we better start making friends with some kids. And so I made it a mission, and we did. And we have a spreadsheet now. If you have teenagers, let's be friends. No, but I kid, but you think about that when you're because and I started thinking about when we were taking care of my husband's parents as they were aging, and they've since passed, but like they had the foresight of, they had long-term care in health insurance, and they had sort of planned everything so that there was not the least amount of burden on their daughter and son. But even with that, it was just an enormous amount of work and figuring all this out. And I realized, like, one, I would like to, I think, live in my home as long as I can. And two, even if, like, who's going to do all that navigating for us? And to me, the question of, like, very young children and the elderly are two places where it feels like it makes no sense to me that we don't have collective agreement as a society that there are certain things that can only be taken care of, or that are best taken care of through some kind of social safety net, right? That we can't just get rid of everything, because, like, not everyone in our society does have kids or grandkids to take care of them. And so who will be responsible? And so, like, that part of, like, it just never ceases to amaze me that we just can't seem to get agreement around that. And that, when it comes to the aging population, there are certain things that can only happen with investment. And
I think there you go. And I think that it isn't that there's a constant conversation about funding at the Capitol in this area, and yet the other priorities come in, and somehow I find this in certain areas that I work in. So I work in, like, early childhood. You mentioned, like, 0 to 5, who obviously cannot advocate for themselves. In aging, in like long-term care and those initiatives, and, like, veterans. And everybody, like, politically has a talking point and supports, but then when it comes to the budget, it can get real disappointing. And I don't know why that is. I can just say, like, as Brian reiterated, the fact, that you are here today, the fact that you, besides doing all the work that you do with your organization, and all that you take time out and you come to St. Paul and you go to the Capitol and you take the time to answer those action alerts that you get, and you email and you make those phone calls. It really does make a difference. I can't tell you the number of times as a senator and Senate Majority Leader that I would hear from other members, oh gosh, I got a whole crowd from LeadingAge here today, or I've got a big crowd, I got a bunch of emails on this issue. I don't know how it is in DC. I don't know that anybody cares there, but I will tell you at the state level, your advocacy really makes a difference. And that is, I think, again, to Javier's point, it's the only thing like driving that bus, but it's not just like advocating showing up, but like kind of holding people's feet to the fire. That it's not just rhetoric and it's not just political talking, or I'm in front of you now, and so you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. But when the rubber hits the road, when a budget is crafted, where do you see yourselves in that budget? And sort of following back up with an accountability to say either where are we, or also, hey, great job. You really did a nice thing for us this time around. And we appreciate the care that you're giving to our issues.
Obviously, your issue has champions on both sides of the aisle. So it is definitely in your to your benefit to not say, well, we're Republican, we're Democrat, and obviously there's all parts of the spectrum are represented in this room. But one of the most important things, and this ties into what Amy was saying about holding people's feet to the fire, is that once any group feels like they have your vote no matter what, they stop listening to you. So never stop making one side or the other earn your vote. And I think that, we're seeing political shifts, and we all can argue whether they're good or bad, or, if dystopia is, just around the corner. But I think it's very important that groups that have traditionally identified as only Republican or mostly Republican, or only Democrat and mostly Democrat, that they are starting to shift around, because it is making the parties have to kind of look inward and say, who are our supporters? And as long as they kind of don't know, that means that they have to, pay attention to more people and more issues. And I think that we are at a period of time politically where, the opportunity exists for people to flex political muscle that they didn't know that they had, or that one side listened to, but had the benefit to say, oh, I would have given you everything you wanted, but the darn Dems, or the GOP won't fund this or that. I think that you are in a position where you can play both sides against the middle to your political advantage, and I certainly hope that that's what you're doing now. With just getting back a little bit to the Hollywood part, because
Good.
Only because I think that we were in a period of entertainment where it's kind of seemed like we didn't know who they were actually trying to entertain. With people getting older, the audience is getting older. Do you think that your viewing has kind of skewed different that at different parts of your life? Are you looking to see yourself more in your entertainment, or is it all Sydney Sweeney all the time? So that's more for me than for Javier, but
I didn't even understand that sentence.
Sydney Sweeney. Well, Sydney Sweeney was on the Super Bowl commercial with Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal.
No,
the Hellman's commercial.
That's
okay.
okay. I was fine not knowing.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So I just think it's I think it's actually a natural shift that we're seeing. One, the demographics are shifting. I mean, first of all, we still have octogenarians running most of the levers of government, for better or for worse. Those folks certainly see themselves, or as best they can, in what's happening on the media. But no, I mean, is 80 the new 60? Maybe. And as healthcare improves, and as people are going to live longer, I mean, apparently Brian's going to live to 120 with your grandmother at 100.
Oh, I doubt that.
I have diabetes. I had a heart attack in August.
I was like, have you remembered his health history?
I need a double shoulder replacement.
I'm trying to manifest.
My knees are killing me. I might not make it through this show.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that there's a lot of sort of poo-pooing of like issues, like questions of representation. But I think when it, like on this issue, right, like it is remarkable when you think that that when you think of a show featuring people like in retirement, you think of the Golden Girls, and that was in the 80s.
And by the way, they were in their 50s.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't
times
need to be reminded of that.
they were in their 50s.
No, I know. No, but
both of you, thank you for being a friend.
Oh. Estelle Getty was one of the younger ones.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Sophia.
Who's the reboot with?
I don't think I knew about it until I read it.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Does anybody know? We're gonna have to Google it.
Yeah, but
we'll be watching.
But
During the question and answer period, we want you guys to say who you would cast.
There you go.
There you go.
I like that. But when you think how few representations there are of intergenerational like relationships and families, and like that it is striking to me just how much we erase the process of aging. There are so many things that you find out about, not the least of which bodily functions, but just as one ages, like my brother and I joke with my dad, is like, why didn't you tell us about that thing that's going to happen to our bodies?
Don't even get me started on menopause, because it's ridiculous, ladies. Like, why are we not talking about this?
Because it's gross.
No, it is not.
Wow.
This is the
Wow.
problem.
Wow.
You guys are the problem.
All right. So start writing down those questions. Start writing
We
down
will
those
go to
questions.
the women's clinics. We will get on our hormones.
Yeah. Can we get
Well, and tying in with Javier, and this is kind of where I wanted to go with it, is that one of the things that I am seeing is whether it's shifts in media, or kind of a little bit of a TikTok backlash or a Kardashian backlash, but I'm almost feeling like we're starting to shift a little bit more towards a desire to see people naturally age, and people who are overly sculpted or have had a lot of work trying to pass themselves off at a certain age. I don't know that that's necessarily in vogue.
It's a weird mix, though, because you do see a lot of people with like the heavy Botox and fillers and all of the things, and then the juxtaposition of like a Pam Anderson, who was, the sex goddess Baywatch lady, who now, she was just again in another Super Bowl commercial, and she's just aging gracefully. She looks gorgeous. She barely wears any makeup. It's just like a total shift from her. She does it just, I think it's fantastic. I think it's, I just think embrace it, whatever it looks like.
Yeah.
And not to say like do your Botox, do all of those things that you want that makes you feel better. But don't do it for other people. Just do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in favor of anyone doing anything they want.
Yeah, heck yeah.
But on the one hand, and on the other, like the societal pressure that just privileges it's like we're constantly telling ourselves that only youth matters, and it's counterproductive for those of us who are not young to participate in that, but we continue to.
Well, my wife and I just watched this last weekend. We watched the movie called The Substance. I don't know if anyone saw that. It's actually a Netflix movie, and it had been nominated for several Academy Awards, so I was very interested in it. And what was most interesting was how did it get nominated for any awards, because the last 25 minutes of it are ridiculous. But the first half, 2/3 of it, actually are a very interesting kind of allegory on aging, and kind of different ads, the different articles will say it's either like through the male gaze or through the female gaze. I guess when I was watching it, I was seeing it as kind of women talking to women in it. But in it, Demi Moore plays a 50-year-old famous person. She's actually in her 60s in real life, so I thought it was interesting that she's playing a 50-year-old. But and then being kind of pushed out of her entertainment position, and then kind of the steps that people would go to kind of recapture their youth. It was interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if there are more shows like that. We're kind of getting into the part where we want to start hearing from you.
Yeah.
But just wrapping up kind of our portion of this, our solo portion, looking at the 2025 legislature. So this is a budget year. So this is when they need to put together their biennial budget. We don't have to bore you with all of the shenanigans that have been going on in the Minnesota House.
Unless you want to talk about that. Your questions are that.
Yeah, we'll answer your question. But in it, what it has done is it has erased a month out of the process. And if we don't get our budget done by June 30th, we will start having shutdowns. And it's been whenever we've had power sharing, when we've had divided government, there have been many instances where we've had to go to the brink of a shutdown before we got that budget. And I'm just curious, what impact do you think are the political ramifications of what has been going on in the last month and a half, 2 months? What impact do you think that's going to have on the budget? And do you think that they're actually going to be able to put one together, or are they going to have to start talking about lights on bills or continuing resolutions, or what?
I mean,
do you see it?
I think at this point that I feel like that stuff is almost eclipsed by when you think of, like, I've heard people talking about the possibility of having to do kind of like essentially rolling sessions, because with all that's happening on the federal level, we like, and the unpredictability of who's going to be in government and what departments will exist or are not, and everything that's going on, and with slashing happening in a way that where people are not thinking of the ramifications. Think of like the way, like USAID was blasted, and then all of a sudden people remembered, oh wait, like our farmers like make a lot of money off of USAID programs. And so seeing the ramifications of things that because this is at the federal level, they're talking about it as like an attempt to shrink government. I think it's not an attempt to shrink government. It's an attempt to replace government employees with political loyalists, and but also that at a state level, like, are we going to see growth in government at state levels, because states are going to realize that it comes to issues like education and aging and such, that there's a lot the federal government that federal government programs take care of, that if they are suddenly cut, like how do you even budget in that scenario?
All right, we have our first question from the group. It says here, the governor's race, and I would say the Senate race, seems to have unofficially launched yesterday. Do you think any candidate emerging from either party will care about Minnesota seniors?
Yeah. So yesterday, if you missed it, U.S. Senator Tina Smith announced that she will not seek re-election in 2026. So that's what happened. So the Capitol just went kaboom. Additionally, almost immediately, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan put out a decisive announcement that she is seeking that U.S. Senate seat. Governor Walz announced, or did a leaked story or whatever that says that he's considering a run for that U.S. Senate seat. I think there were a couple other state reps, Senator Robbins or Representative Robbins, who else, that said that they were looking at the U.S. Senate seat.
Senator Coleman, Julia Coleman.
Yep.
There's Senator Housley's name was thrown out there. They're
Yep.
We're not saying any of the names that we just said, but a couple people approached us saying, well, when you're doing your media stuff, if you can kind of float my name. Some of those names were plausible, and some of them were.
Everybody at the Capitol, when they look in the mirror, every elected member sees a governor or a U.S. senator, right? And so that's okay. That's just how it is.
Is it though?
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't know. But anyway, so when that happened, though, obviously then the governor is sort of soft launching that he may not run for his third term.
Just point out that the governor has $1 million raised into his state campaign account that cannot be used for federal purposes. So no. I think the money would suggest that he's running for re-election.
Well, and so, but that opens up a lot of doors, right? There's just a lot of card shuffle. And so, I think the governor's latest budget was incredibly difficult on Minnesota's seniors. It was a pretty austere budget compared particularly to the last couple of years. But that's because he's now staring down in the 27-28 biennium a $5 billion deficit. But in that, clearly, some priorities were made and kept, and others were not. And I think that aging took it on the head.
So who are the possible Republican candidates for governor?
So for governor, now what happened yesterday with Senate kind of changes everything, because now there are more spots for people. But the names that you had been hearing for governor, you were hearing potentially Congressman Tom Emmer. You were hearing potentially Congressman Pete Stauber.
Both have said they are not.
They ruled it out, which I was surprised.
But lots of people say lots of things.
Yeah.
But you were hearing those names. A couple of.
Wait, are you saying you think that one or both of them might take that back?
I think that
a lot can happen in a year.
If they pray on it, if they if they prey on it, if they start, really, if the people of Minnesota really are just demanding that they throw their names into the ring, they might do that. So you were hearing those names for governor, but you weren't hearing a lot of interest coming back from either of them about it. With the opening of the Senate race, you started hearing more names. We said, Senator Julia Coleman, Representative Kristen Robbins, Senator Karen Housley. So
and Karen, by the way, actually ran.
Yeah.
Well, she ran for U.S. Senate before, but she when she her first chairmanship was an aging committee. She actually set up an aging committee. She has a long experience with her parents. And she navigated both of them. They have now both passed, but her mother had memory issues, and her father actually passed away before her mother in a kind of surprising way. And she uncovered a lot of issues at the state government in inspections, and really revamped and reformed that through her committee. She's very committed to the issue, so that would be a possible candidate. That would be a very strong advocate for U.S. Senate or governor, I think.
And I think and this is obvious, they're all going to tell you that they do, and it's up to all of us to hold them to that, because all of them are going to have personal stories and be very very concerned about your issues. And the key is, what do they do after they get elected, and to let them know that you're always watching and that they will be held accountable.
All right, should I do this one? The governor proposed, we kind of touched on this. The governor proposed $200 million in cuts to nursing homes, but also recognized that more seniors need care. Do you think lawmakers will give these cuts attention? What advice do you have to elevate our issue? Well, so the first thing I will say to you is that the governor's budget, and this is not a cut on this governor, any budget, but governor, the governor is in a weird position because constitutionally he's required to put out a budget based on the November forecast. So our November forecast came in, there's a $5 billion deficit, and he has to, by end of January, release a budget. So they're already at odds because the February forecast, which is going to come out on March 5th, is the actual budget that the legislature budgets on. And it can get better. I mean, it can get worse as well. But oftentimes we see the February forecast gets a little better because you're just a little more accurate. And so the governor has sort of this unfortunate task of putting out a budget that pretty much becomes a doorstop as soon as it's printed at the revisor's office. And also, that's not a sign of disrespect, but the governor, these are just like his ideas, and he puts them out there. And frankly, the legislature knows that they're the ones that hold the purse strings on. They hold the purse strings, and they take that very seriously. And so you may see the governor's budget getting some hearings for the next week or two, and then it's largely forgotten. In the end, in the budget negotiations, the governor is definitely, and his agencies are certainly at the table, and he will generally outline a set of priorities that may, is probably or maybe included in his original budget, but it's really not the final word. So look at that governor's budget as the first word, as sort of a here's some ideas. Go ahead.
So this one says, there still appears to be a patronizing view of aging, even in this podcast.
Ow.
I apologize for that. How do we change the view to people contributing as they age? Well, what I would say is, obviously, if anything came off as condescending, I apologize to that. But I think one of the things that I've tried to emphasize is, if you use your power. What power do you have? And don't have other groups speak for you, because we're 50-somethings. If the 50-somethings aren't speaking in the right way about people older than them, well, then don't have the 50-somethings be the spokespeople. Have people from those generations speaking on their behalf. There is power there. We know, we're talking about how the population is aging. Well, who are voters? Voters are the population. And I can remember when there was a larger emphasis on how much older people vote, and that was when there weren't as many older people. So I think that how do things change? Well, You can't have the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s being the spokespeople. I'm not saying have Donald Trump and Joe Biden be the face of aging either, but finding the correct people, mobilizing the power of numbers, and then, like I said, using that power to hold people's feet to the fire.
Also, we're Gen X, so if we are a little bit just sort of bitter and dismissive, that's just our generation.
I know. I will say, so I've been thinking about this a lot, and at the risk of being too woo-woo, but so I was recently challenged to think, because I had been focusing a lot on we are taught that aging, that at a certain point, your life's plan has happened, or like you're not expected to take on new projects or reinvent yourself or do new things, or these are all stories that we tell ourselves or that society tells us about what aging means. And someone challenged me to say like, all this time you are obsessing thinking about that and making yourself feel awful about it. Are you avoiding thinking instead about like what role do you want to have right now in your work, how do you want things to change? It was very important for me to hear, because I think that the societal pressures around age and aging are everywhere, but also it's just so, it's again one of these things you learn as you age, right? Is that like we all experience aging, so it is baffling that we would put these constraints around ourselves, but I feel it's just really critically important for everyone in every stage of life that we make an effort to do what Brian is saying, to like ensure that that we have a multiplicity of voices standing in for society. So awkward, because all the awkward jokes about age or whatever are all contribute to that, and we can't seem to get out of it.
Yeah.
Another question. If you have knowledge about the Minnesota Workforce Board and their actions of 2024 that mandate compliance with holiday pay and wage increases as an unfunded mandate, what is the chance that those powers can be stripped by the board in 2025? Maybe just a clarifying question. Is this the Labor Standards Board? Okay, yes. So I know a little bit about it. Actually, Aaron and I interacted a little bit on this as the city of Minneapolis was going forward with their version of a labor standards board, kind of more broadly, something that was ultimately passed by the city council and vetoed by the mayor. That was something that for varying interests I was following. So I think the Labor Standards Board, how it has applied to your industry is a little bit of a cautionary tale, and it's something that is definitely informing people's decisions as it tries to get kind of put in place more broadly other places. Do I think that the powers of the board have a good shot to be stripped in 2025? I've seen the bills. The language that is looking to do that. I would say that if you look at the makeup of the legislature, the Senate having a 1-vote DFL majority, the House temporarily having a 1-vote Republican majority, eventually probably becoming a tie, and with a DFL governor, I don't know that I would necessarily predict that will happen. But what I will also say is that everything is trade-offs. Everything is compromise. And you don't know if one side wants something and the other side wants something else, there's always the chance that they're going to trade A for B. So I don't want to say that there is no chance for this or for anything. But on just a straight up vote, I'm not sure that the votes are there to radically change the workforce board.
But certainly those are going to be conversations about the workforce board, conversations. There's been a huge spike in unemployment rates. It's kind of a perfect storm on that. Paid family medical leave, earned sick and save time, all of these new programs and benefits that have been put into place are all up for discussion and debate and potential change this year at the state capitol. Because of the deficit and not having a lot of money on the table, it creates an imperative in a way to do some fixes like that, because they don't have $18 billion to spend, where they can kind of say, well, we're spending $18 billion and we're also going to put all these requirements and do all these changes. Now the money is gone. And so doing some changes to help alleviate some of the cost drivers in industries is going to be, I think, an important piece of this legislative session.
And I think that what we're what we're continuing to not see is collaboration between Republicans and Democrats. What we're seeing is when one side has the power, they're putting in a whole bunch of stuff that's offensive to the other side. Then when the other side gets in power, they spend all their time trying to undo everything that the other side done, rather than trying to work collaboratively to have something that is able to stand the test of time. I don't know that I see that changing now either. But with the very narrow majorities, the opportunities to swing wildly from one extreme to the next, it doesn't really exist, especially in the House. We're going to have most likely a 67-67 tie, but you need 68 votes to pass a bill. So the whole time that the Republicans were in the chamber by themselves and the Democrats were working in their districts, the whole time they were arguing over who's in charge of what, knowing that they were going to need someone, at least one person, from the other side in order to pass any bill. So at no point in time could the Republicans jam something down the Democrats' throats, nor could the Democrats jam something down the Republicans' throats. And in the Senate, you have the formation of a moderate kind of sub-caucus called the Blue Dogs, which made it very clear that they're not interested in tax increases and things of that nature. So the ability to do something that is offensive to one side or the other politically doesn't necessarily exist, but for bipartisanship, which is a little bit of a lost art.
Okay, we have one more question, and we have to start wrapping up. This comes from our producer, which is it's a perennial question from him. How will the inevitable disclosure of UAP and non-human intelligence benefit the senior living industry complex?
And that's just so
ridiculous.
Our producer is obsessed
Gabe
with.
desperately wants us to talk about UFOs.
He so wants us to, every show. He's like, it was good, but not enough UAP talk. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're
I
right.
don't even know what those letters mean. But I mean,
Please subscribe to our podcast. You can go on the YouTube page, Wrong About Everything podcast, and find us on audio form on Spotify or anywhere you get podcasts.
But I think one thing that we are seeing is that certainly with AI is starting to creep into everything that we do. We see a lot. There's hearing upon hearing upon hearing, and I think that these technological advances, whether they come from the ancient Egyptians or the aliens, I think are going to allow the older population to be better communicative longer. I think probably you're going to start seeing things that make them physically be able to endure certain things longer. So hopefully these things will be used solely for good. We know that probably won't be what it is, but there is always that Pollyanna-ish hope that we're going to eventually create something that doesn't just destroy us either mentally or physically. We are at time a little bit, so I think that I don't know if anyone has any closing arguments, or if you just want to.
What I would just say is, thank you so much for having us here today. Thank you for letting us record this podcast in front of you, even if it was just a little bit weird. We're really grateful. We're grateful for what you do. As you all heard, we all have a story.
and we all understand the importance of this room and the folks in this room and the role that you play. And we would just encourage you and let you know that every human being at that Capitol has a story like ours. And it's just like sort of taking your agenda and applying it to their story to help them understand why you do what you do, why it's so important, and why they need to back you up with policy and funding that works for you is the most important thing that you can do today and as this legislative session progresses.
So with that, I am Republican strategist and throwing my hat in the ring to play Blanche in the Golden Girls reboot, Brian McDaniel.
I am still hot for Han Solo, Amy Koch.
I am Democratic strategist and the Puerto Rican heat, Javier Murillo.
And we are
Wrong
about everything. Thank you so
very
much,
Leading
LeadingAge.
Age.
NBC. No relation to NBC.